This is an overview of the book Wesley and the People Called Methodists by Richard P. Heitzenrater. Let's begin with Henry VIII and the English Reformation. Henry was the King of England from 1509 to his death in 1547. Henry was married to Catherine of Aragon, who was the daughter of Ferdinand and Isabella, you know, the folks that sent Columbus overseas. Well, Henry decided he didn't want to be married to Catherine anymore and wanted to marry Anne Boleyn, but he couldn't until Catherine was disposed of. The Pope wouldn't declare an annulment, so Henry did his own thing and broke away from the Catholic Church. Now, England is in the state of religious limbo. Now, instead of the Church in England, we have the Church of England. This led to two distinct changes, which are in liturgy and polity. Now, Henry was in control of the church and the state. There is no such thing as separation between church and state in England. The liturgical change was services were now conducted in English, not Latin. Henry had some help in developing this new church's doctrine. That guy was Archbishop Cranmer. Cranmer wrote 3 distinct books. The first was the Book of Homilies in 1546, which is 21 sermons that were to be read from the pulpit. Don't you just love read sermons? The second was Book of Common Prayer in 1549. This was the official liturgy of the church. Then finally, he helped write the 42 Articles, which made the Church of England more Protestant than ever. So now we have Henry VIII is dead. His son Edward VI takes throne, dies shortly. Then Lady Jane Grey, but that's another story. Eventually, Bloody Mary. Queen Mary I. She takes the throne 9 days later. Mary I wanted to restore Catholicism to England, but Heitzenrater says her reign wasn't long enough, and the change didn't occur. She was called Bloody Mary because of the extreme number of Protestant executions during her reign, Archbishop Cranmer being one of them. When Mary dies, Elizabeth I takes the throne for the next 40-plus years. Elizabeth was far more Protestant than her sister and re-established the Church of England as her father once secured it. A number of acts were passed in Parliament during her reign. First was the Act of Supremacy in 1559, which made her the supreme governor of the church and head of the state. The Act of Uniformity in 1559 created standards for liturgy and doctrine in church. Altogether, these were known as the Elizabethan Settlement. All in all, Elizabeth I was a boost to Protestantism in England. Stop! Am I going too fast? No? Good. We're going to keep going. In 1595, Richard Hooker wrote the Laws of Ecclesiastical Polity, defining via media, or the middle way, into 3 parts: Scripture, Tradition, and Reason. Wesley later added experience to this to complete the Wesleyan Quadrilateral. Doctrine, or Scripture, is of course the Holy Bible. Tradition is the holy practices, such as baptism and communion. Reason is using common sense to think about Scripture and tradition. And experience is how an individual literally experiences God or the Holy Trinity. So now we have King James I, Charles I, Charles II, followed by King James II, who was not well liked at all because he was a Catholic sympathizer. So Parliament thought it best to place Protestants, William and Mary, as the new monarch. Mary was James II's daughter. Those who opposed William and Mary's reign were known as non-jurors and stripped of positions in the church and state. The Calvinists, the ones who followed this guy, John Calvin, gave the Arminians a derogatory name of Methodists. Arminians believed in disciplines of the Christian life, necessity of holy living, and importance of conversion. The nickname stuck, but it changed to New Methodists. New societies were forming all over England. One in particular was a society for promoting Christian knowledge. The Wesleys were members of this society. These societies focused on social reform, such as helping the poor and the imprisoned. These are the Wesleys: Samuel, the father; Susanna, the mother; John; and Charles, their sons. They lived at Epworth Rectory. Susanna held education very highly, and both sons went to Christ Church and Oxford for higher education. Both sons were ordained as Anglican priests. Heitzenrater gives 3 rises to Methodism, the first being at Oxford. Wesley formed social groups that involved studies and volunteering in prisons and with the poor. The second came in the colony of Georgia. Wesley traveled to the New World and tried to minister to the Indians, but had to leave because of Miss Sophie Hawkey. The third was in London. This is the real takeoff of Methodism because John Wesley, George Whitefield, and others began to go out and preach their new theology of grace, justification, and sanctification. The Moravians were highly influential to John Wesley at this time. Also, his readings of Jeremy Taylor inspired him to keep a daily journal. Not everyone liked these Methodists. They were labeled as disruptive, and many times ministers met with angry mobs. These mobs didn't stop the Wesleys and others. Methodists around England began networking and connecting, but not like on Facebook. The movement still remained under the Church of England. Between the years 1745 and 1775, John Wesley began to cement the doctrine and polity of the Church. He set forth rules for preaching and revised these rules repeatedly. He also developed examinations for the ministers. He declared 3 doctrines: original sin, justification by faith, and the holiness consequent thereon. He developed a circuit plan, which was a schedule for circuit rider ministers to the different communities. John Wesley began holy conferencing, which is still in practice today with annual conferences and general conferences. People didn't always agree with Wesley, and sometimes Methodists don't agree with each other, but during conferences we are able to vote for what we want. Methodism began to spread to the New World, soon to be the USA. Before the American Revolution, Francis Asbury was sent to help the church in America. During and after the American Revolution, he was the only original minister left. Methodists were believed to be loyal to the crown and returned to England. Asbury was an American sympathizer. Yay, Francis Asbury. Time to finally separate from the Church of England came when Asbury wrote to Wesley in need of ordained preachers to give sacraments and baptism. Wesley ordained Asbury and Thomas Coke as superintendents. Coke and Asbury finally took the titles of bishops, which enraged Wesley. This was now the new face of the Methodist Episcopal Church. One of Wesley's last messages to all who called themselves Methodists was, "Continue in full determination, which the Church has lived up to, as a united brethren."